Uh, Recall last time we covered principal American crops that went with the subject of the Columbian Exchange. We discussed the significance of these crops and of sugarcane, particularly the exploitation of gold mines and beginnings of the hacienda system. We will get back to that later in another section. We will expand on that. And then the need for slaves. Also, we veered away from that and went into the cattle business and went into some discussion about the cowboys, how they happened all through the Americas, and how they produced these particular individuals that really developed a culture, developed a technology, and a way of thinking that is with us still today. And yes, music too. All right. In this section, I thought we veer away and consider Portugal and Spain, the contrasts. Of course, you know, these two nations, here is Portugal and here is Spain. They're next to each other, and you will think that they would think the same way, they will do things the same way. Wrong. Just totally wrong. They had their own way of thinking, and then also of agreeing. So there was quite a bit of agreement, and there was quite a bit of difference. The best thing that can be said for the most part, and I said underline for the most part, they didn't do war on each other. So they cannot respect their positions. And that is what we are going to talk about today. We'll begin a little bit, we presented this before, a little bit about the Reconquista, that is the taking back, the recovering of the lands that the Muslims had taken from the Christians. And that's a way of thinking. This was true for Portugal, and this was true for Spain. At one time, okay, when the Christians, both Portugal and Spain, started this reconquest, this taking back, they quickly made little kingdoms in the northern part of the peninsula. This is in 790. In 1147, the Portuguese had succeeded in taking Lisbon from the, so they were in relatively short time, they had succeeded in taking back land that they thought was theirs. And this is just quickly to show you, here the Emirates, all of that was in Muslims' hand. These were the Christian kingdoms, and it goes on like that until about 1250. This was the situation. The kingdoms of Leon and Castile were separate independent kingdoms, Navarre and Aragon. You notice now that Leon and Castile had merged into what became the kingdom of Castile. Aragon was over here, remained independent, although they acted together. All right. Once the Portuguese ran out of land to reconquer, they then shifted and focused on seafaring. They colonized the Azores, which they had discovered, Madeira over here, and initiated a trade, underline trade-driven exploration strategy to reach India and the spice-rich countries in Asia. They coasted south, okay, and by the early 1500s, they had reached India. It was not conquering was trading. They would establish trading posts. They were not interested in holding land. Pending the conquest of Granada, the remaining Muslim kingdom in Iberia, Castile continued with a focus of developing a strong nobility-based land army. Land conquest and exploitation and conversion of subjects to Christianism were the main drivers. This was in contrast with Portugal. They were less interested in the Christianization and more interested in the trade per se. Okay? So what we have, I repeat, we then have the kingdom of, the kingdom of Portugal. Okay. Oh boy. We have the kingdom of Castile and kingdom of Aragon. Now they merged, okay, and Spain proper was born. Aragon, that's the eastern part of the peninsula, was a smaller partner. They didn't have the men or the wealth to participate in the American experience. So they were told to keep out of that game, and this was so for the next 3 centuries. The Aragonese subjects were explicitly prohibited from participating in the colonization of the Americas until the 1750s. It was that long. Few people realize that. So this was a Castilian enterprise. Even though they worked together, they still told one, no, you stay out. You don't have the means. We don't want you here. Well, that was very late. And we do, if you've been in California, you will know now Saint Junípero Serra. And he was sent by Spain that late. But Junípero Serra was from the Majorca, that is the kingdom of Aragon. So it took that long before Spain actually allowed the Aragonese to come to the Americas. Was sent to, he settled up the mission of San Diego de Alcalá in San Diego. Very successful man. These are all missions established after they were allowed, permitted to enter into the enterprise of occupying the Americas. The Kingdom of Aragon, at its peak, occupied all of this in the Mediterranean. They controlled the Mediterranean, de facto. You couldn't do business there without coming in contact with the Aragonese. In their coat of arms, and here I'm going to digress a little. We need to understand symbols. We need to understand symbols. This, and there's a story behind this. I'm not going to get into that. This was the coat of arms of the Kingdom of Aragon. Okay? One of the oldest, still stands, oldest in Europe. And now I'm going to show you the coat of arms of Spain. You see that? That's the Kingdom of Leon, the Kingdom of Castile, the Aragon, okay, and then Navarre, and of course, you guessed it, Granada. So the point is, the coat of arms has them together, okay? But each one is shown in the national coat of arms. So they're like, yes, you're free, but you're here. We're all together. That was the thought, okay? Then you have the Pillars of Hercules thing, okay? Symbols are important. symbols are important. And it says plus ultra, meaning further beyond, see, wrapped up here. What's that refer to? Very important. Way back, Phoenician times and so on, they had the pillars of Hercules, something, nobody knows what they look like, but probably just two columns, on each side of the Strait of Gibraltar. In it, it said, non terra plus ultra, no land further beyond. Don't go beyond this because there's nothing, okay? This was inscribed at the strait, as I said. What the Spanish said? No. It's going to be plus ultra. After Columbus discovered, he said, we have demonstrated that there is stuff. But underlying that is this: take risks and strive for excellence. So this was stay together, but do something. In 1492, I had to make it. This was written, I took it from the web, but I can tell you it was from California. People that like to redo history, notice the word invasion. It was not an invasion, it was an outright declaration of war that lasted 10 years. So there was no, but you got to watch this, guys, Anyway, the Treaty of Granada completes the Reconquista, and that was in January of 1492. In the edict, now you see, we're unifying. Well, to unify, they threw the Jews out. Because you don't belong here. This is a Christian kingdom. I don't see where you belong, and you have been fighting with the enemy. Never mind that there were also Jews fighting for the Spanish side. So they're thrown out. But I mention this because there was a very strong thought of unity, acting together, and Christianization. Okay? These two divergent drivers for expansion reflected the grand strategy of world domination by Portugal and Spain. Here I'm using world domination. They weren't thinking about world domination. They were thinking about Christianizing. That was the driver behind it. The Portuguese continue with their trade approach, not so the Spanish. Portuguese and Spanish wisely signed the Treaty of Tordesillas. This had been suggested by the Pope, because they said, well, probably based on what was going on in Italy, said these two are going to fight. So the Pope suggested that they divide. Can you imagine that today? This line, north to south, and from here east, it would be Portugal, and from here west, it would be Spain. Well, they didn't agree, and then finally they agreed on this line, which is the Treaty of Tordesillas. The world is going to be Christianized, okay? So to the east is Portugal, and to the west is Spain. Easy enough. Most of the Americas then, except for the northeastern Brazilian coast, fell under the influence of Spain. And minimal colonial rivalry took place in between the two empires thanks to this treaty. So like I said at the beginning, they rarely ever came to blows on anything. That's what it says. From here on, east is Portugal. The line was the Treaty of Tordesillas, T-O-R-D-S. It's a treaty, and it held for quite a while. But anyway, they had it all divided. Why could they do this? Because nobody in Europe could do it. Nobody in Europe had the means to navigate, to build ships, or even the will to do this. And here is a Cantinas 1502 map. And you see how well, fairly well, describes Africa. Why? Because that's where the Portuguese were spending most of their activity and sending back accurate readings on the position of the various parts of this continent. Portugal, consistent with a trade-oriented grand strategy. They sent explorers. They had signed the Treaty of Tordesillas, so they had to do something. They had a bit of Brazil, and they had to send some people there to take it and settle it. Otherwise, you know, it wouldn't be theirs. But their priority was the setting up key trade outposts in Africa: Zanzibar, Oman, India, Macau, and Indonesia, the Spice Island. This is what they had. Efforts to call it, it's important to understand, were secondary during the 1500s and 1600s. Portuguese were not that interested in Brazil as compared to what they were doing in Africa and then in the Indian Ocean. The Dutch and the French, for example, they took parts. They went over there. They didn't understand the Treaty of Tordesillas, so they went and took it. They were not challenged. But when the Portuguese decided that they had to stay there too long, they kicked them out. The lack of complex civilization, this is important to understand. Areas of America with sparse but aggressive native populations made it difficult to take over the territory by conquering any existing state structure. There were no state structures. All they had some very aggressive Indians who took exception to having their lands, you know, taken from them. So what they did is, okay, they will stay along the coast, and we'll set up trading posts, and that would be peachy. That's exactly what they did. To exploit, there were mines. They discovered gold and several other things. And to exploit them in these valleys, they heavily imported African slaves from their network of trade outposts in the African coast. So there's another component now. So they took slaves from Angola, Mozambique, and a little bit from what was later known as the Slave Coast. And they took them over to Brazil. The real land expansion in Brazil by the Portuguese really did not start until the mid-1700s. Recall I said they really were not interested in Brazil. And this was done with people known as the bandeirantes. They carried the flag, bandera. They carried the flag and they would just go all over the place so that invading and ravaging interior, aiming at expanding the increasingly profitable production of sugarcane and coffee. The irony is that sugarcane was a lot more valuable than all the gold and all the other things that they had found, both for Spain and also for Portugal. And I don't say that because I have an ag background. Those are facts. You can check the money, okay? These are the bandeirantes. Look at this guy. He's ready. He's ready to go, okay? But they did, and they started doing a little bit, but then they grew in importance. The bandeirantes, the main focus of the bandeirantes' earlier mission was to enslave natives, so that as to bring them into their plantation or enterprises and make them work. they, at the same time, they cannot be underrated because in their escapades and expeditions, they did learn about the geography, the rivers, and all of that, and that was set down. That was set down as accurate descriptions of what there was in the interior of what is now Brazil. So, and that is what on map search. Portugal, I repeat, from the beginning, they were not too interested in what is now Brazil. They first accused me. I'm having trouble with this. Okay. They first actually divided the coast and gave grants to anyone that had the money or the interest or had done something. So they granted them the right to exploit these different slices, so to speak, of what they had occupied. Notice too that they were independent of each other. Each one of these grantees took the land that was given to them, exploited, but didn't have to answer to the guys next door to them. They answered directly to Portugal. With time, this became unwieldy. So then they divided it up into a northern part and a southern part. And this went on through the Treaty of Madrid, where Spain and Portugal came together because they were beginning to have frictions, okay, and agreed that this was going to be Brazil. And this was at the day of independence. So it went all the way from this kind of situation to this kind of situation. Important to notice that they were next to each other and they had been kept together as one single unit, all right? So what were they doing? I mean, what did they find there? In the beginning, they found dyes. Brazil dye wood. And this is what a tree looks like, and they were interested in this. This particular kind of color was very rare and very profitable. So what did they do? They went crazy and exploiting the tree and the wood. See, look, pretty nice. In a few years, we're humans. We always do this. They cut down the trees, no thought about perpetuating it, and pretty soon the dye wood went out, and there was nothing. They killed it all. But there's time and again we do these things. Excessive exploitation led to a steep decrease in the number of Brazil wood trees in the 18th century, causing the collapse of this economic activity. Okay. But then came in sugar. And sugar was very serious. The first commercial production of sugar in the New World was undertaken as a commercial production, okay, in 1550, when Portuguese donatarios, this was the grantees, built mills near Pernambuco and San Vicente along the Atlantic coast. Here, right there. So they started sugar production. I already mentioned it before, extremely profitable. It was not known, they had experience with sugar because they had planted in the island of Madeira. They had extensive sugar mills and sugar production. And before this Brazilian production started in Europe, sugar came from Madeira in the Portuguese domain or from the Canary Islands in the Spanish domain. The Portuguese pioneered, important to know this, the plantation system from old world examples and adapted it to the special conditions of the New World. The plantation was born here, you know. Plantation in the American sense. The plantation system of and the Caribbean, like the hacienda system, they're pretty much the same on the continent, would endure for centuries as the model for agricultural production and rural society. The introduction of slavery was necessary. Sugar production provided one of the original means and motivations, okay, for European expansion, colonization, and control of the New World. Okay. It precipitated, state that, a course of events that shaped the history of the Western Hemisphere. I stand ready to argue that. Okay. Alone, and we are now in post-colonial Brazil. Post-colonial Brazil. Coffee showed up. And coffee, well, everybody had a few bushes of coffee, you know, for the house and so on. But then, notice the parallel to what happened with cotton, okay? In the later, or actually not later, in this period too, okay? High world prices of the late 1820s, early 1830s. Remember, in the 1700s, no cotton was grown in the South. But the same happened here. Coffee, yeah, they had it around, but it wasn't serious until the prices dictated, hey, there is something here, let's start planting this crop. The impact of coffee on the Brazilian economy was much stronger than that of sugar and gold. So there you go, the sugar. Then they become independent. Hey, we got coffee, okay? All right? Coffee story began, Brazil was already free from the limitations imposed, you know, by the metropolis, across the Atlantic, okay? The substitution of slave labor for wage labor after 1870, slavery was abolished in 1888 in Brazil, meant an increase in efficiency and formation of a domestic market for wage goods. Excuse my pronunciation. It happened here at Sao Paulo State in the Paraíba Valley. And you notice all along here, this is the Atlantic Forest Domain, and it went all the way from Pernambuco down all the way into this valley. And coffee started being planted, just creeping up north, all through the coast, because it was ideal for the production of coffee. What happened? They destroyed the place. Coffee is one of the worst crops that you can plant as far as soil health. It is worse, Charlie, it is much worse than cotton. It really does destroy the soil. And the only way that they could maintain production was by massive use of fertilizers. But as far as the forest, the original Atlantic Forest Domain, forget it, it's gone. They got little patches now, and they're trying to reforest the area, but the problem is that the soil is gone. There's really very little chance of doing that. So coffee is bad. Then along with that, the Brazilian economy is tied up and becomes dependent on coffee production. Okay, parallels, how about cotton? In the U.S., same thing happened. 60% of the exports in the U.S. were cotton. Here it was even exports and 51%, see? There's a parallel here. Sugar, cotton, tobacco, cocoa, and during the turn of the century, rubber boom, rubber were also important. So Brazil became dependent on coffee, and then by extension on all these other plantation crops. Okay, forget Brazil now. We go.
I have a question about, did they cultivate coffee like we do cotton? Because it was, cotton itself is not bad on the land, it's the way we cultivate it.
I agree.
Same thing true with
Yeah.
coffee, but the coffee I've seen, they do not, it's perennial, they do not kill the land.
It's an exact repeat. An exact repeat. But over there was destruction, and that's why coffee is much worse than cotton. There was destruction of the soil. Maybe the soils were not suitable, that I don't know. But we get back to the more interesting thing, my opinion was, we have Henry the Navigator. We're back in Portugal. Okay? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Henry, Prince Henry, encouraged his father John to conquer Ceuta. Remember, they had finished, Portugal had finished cleansing their area of Muslims. But then Henry thought, we're not finished yet. We can now start on Africa. And he encouraged his father to attack North Africa. He knew about the opportunities offered by the Saharan trade. Remember I said the slaves coming from the slave coast all the way north, and there was a lot of money to be made there. So he himself led the attack on Ceuta, and they took the town. Okay, so now Portugal has a foothold in the African continent. That was in 1415. And if you noticed, you see right here, look, that became their flag. That was the Portuguese flag. Is still retained. Henry is regarded as the patron of Portuguese exploration and founder of the Portuguese Empire. Never thought about that, right? But this happened, okay? There was always the thought that there was a Christian kingdom in the northeastern Africa. How that thought came back to Europe, I haven't been able to, but they all thought there was the kingdom of Prester John, okay? And indeed that was true. That was Abyssinia, today Ethiopia. So the thought of helping or aiding the Christians against their fight against the Muslims, there was some thinking, very serious thinking about that, to justify and drive this trading approach that the Portuguese took. In this map, the route, the They were after this, the Spice Islands, because a lot of money, you know, black pepper and that sort of thing were extremely profitable. But they knew it came from somewhere around here. They knew that from the Arab traders that they came in contact with. They had knowledge of it. But this was pretty much explains how things move, particularly the trade of spices, cloves, nutmeg, mace, and so forth. It's hard for us to understand today that that was that important, but when you look at the prices they paid, you understand immediately that this was important. As I mentioned, yeah.
Besides Kerala, Goa, where else in India did the Portuguese,
I'm sorry.
where else in India were the Portuguese besides Goa?
Yeah, I'll go into that now. Okay. We're beginning, right now we're beginning to develop that. He was the son of a Portuguese king. He was a man of action. He had led the attack and conquest of Ceuta. And, but there was a science part of him. He started the first school for navigation. Got people from all over Europe, come. Anybody who knew about map making, navigation, and astronomy, come. You got a job here. In 1834, he sent an expedition, you know, to sail around the dangerous West African coast. There was again something about Cape Bojador. If you went further south than that, you were going to get in trouble, okay? But he said, no, go. And he funded it, okay? Made more than 50 trips down Africa's west coast. Let's stop here for a few minutes. Had a nice place. This is for astronomical calculations, you know. Now we do it with little bitty things like that. Well, this guy's got accuracy by making a huge, you know, a huge circles and so forth that they could do astronomical, very precise astronomical calculations. Okay, he wanted to discover new territory, find a quick trade to Asia and expand Portugal's power. So he had the Henry's Navigation School and willingness to put money into it, okay? Plus ultra, okay? And it's right here, right there in the little Cape of St. Vincent. So I got one, this is a satellite, and you can see how you got a shelter port, and you're right there, you look at all that is going on across the Atlantic, you got an eye on them. So it was very well located. And then there is already discussed the caravel. In challenging coastal navigation, and the Portuguese did challenge it. The Portuguese sailed out of sight of land and discovered Madeira Islands and the Azores. This was 1419, 1427. So Columbus watched it. He was not the first one.
Those are uninhabited?
Madeira was uninhabited, and so was the Azores. Okay. Madeira means woods. And they quickly went and cut down all the trees and made a mess out of it. You know, so, okay. The Portuguese caravel was unusual. I said this before, and it combined the lateen sail with the square sail. The lateen sail, here it is. If you were navigating or sailing against wind, this guy's blowing this way, you took the lateen sail down and could maneuver so that you could actually tack and make progress against the wind. But if the wind was favoring you, like this guy's doing, take that down and use your square sail. This is a Portuguese carrack. The carrack is a larger. Now we're talking war. You notice that it has two castles, and this is to force you to, if you were crazy enough, to force you to jump in there, and then they would destroy you. You know, but that's simple. Okay. This is from some painting. I got it from the web, so it shows you the carrack Santa Catarina do Monte Sinai. Okay, and this is a modern reproduction of a carrack in the high seas. And they can take high seas, and the storms are very, very, very well constructed. There is a monument, of course, in Portugal to the discoveries and Prince Henry in Belém. So Prince Henry thought that the most direct route to Asia would be to sail south around Africa and then sail east to India. He was very clear on that. He was sure that that was the way to do it. Okay. So, repeat. Here was a school, that's the capital, and they had taken Ceuta and established a series of expeditions. And you notice, they said, well, why didn't you just keep going? You cannot carry that much food or water. So how far they could travel depending on how many stores they could have. So usually they would go down maybe 2 months, 3 months, and then return. And Henry and his successor very much wanted to, you come back and give me the navigation and all the knowledge. One of the things, the secret that the states had then was the pilot. The pilot had what they call a portolan, which is the pilot's result. And they will draw from afar what the coastline looked like, okay? But you needed to have the pilot to interpret what he saw. So one of the big fights when you got into a naval encounter was to capture the pilots from the other guys so that to extract the secrets, okay? The Portuguese, can you imagine these days, if they had been there, they would have these things made out of stone with a Portuguese coat of arms, and they would stick it there to alert you. This, you keep going because this is taken already. This is ours. They didn't ask the native nothing. They just put it there. You now belong to Portugal. And you see, they would go down, in this case, Bartolome Diaz. He got down to the Cape and then returned to report on the findings. Okay, there's more. We're taking a course on the seas and so on, and they said that, talked about the, what do you call this, the currents going around. The Portuguese had an exact idea about this before anybody did. They knew that if in the north they had this gyre, or gyre, then there would be an equivalent one in the southern part. And this was proven by them. The guess was correct. So, you can live, excuse me, well, you can leave this one or go down, come this way, using this part of the winds blowing this way for you. Then you get over here and come back, and then you get into the other part of the gyre, and the winds will carry you up. And this is exactly a copycat of what happens in the north part of the Atlantic. So they were very, 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 very sure about these things. Vasco da Gama landed in Calicut, 1498, same year, you know, a little later after they discovered the quotation marks. And he stopped here. I'm sorry?
That is Hollywood, what is now Calcutta.
I can't hear.
It's not, okay.
Okay. So you had all these trade routes. Here we go again. The trade routes, Da Gama, and he went in 1498. Here's Goa. This was the extent of Portuguese exploration in the 1430s and so on. So they were much, much more advanced than anybody in Europe. And all of this was kept secret. They wouldn't share it with anyone. Now, if you went to the school over there, you stay there. They weren't going to let you go out. You know, you stay there with them or else. Okay. One way or the other, you would stay there. Okay. So this is just the sequence of discoveries: Cabral, then Magellan's expedition, 1509, 1508, and they went all the way to Japan. When you think of the size of Portugal, and you think of the size of these ships, this is just incredible, absolutely incredible. The population of Portugal, yeah. What possessed them? They knew about this. They were very, very knowledgeable about the winds, both from the North Atlantic and the South Atlantic. They knew this. They knew that there was this, there had to be this, there had to be this, there had to be that. Okay. Monsoon sailing. They figured that out immediately. When they got over to the Indian Ocean, commercial sailing on long-distance routes was determined by the trade winds and currents in the Atlantic and the seasonal monsoons in the Indian Ocean. These winds blew from the Cape, South Africa, to India in the summer and reversed in the winter. Other patterns applied between India and Japan. These were good sailors, and they knew their winds. It was a sailing world. Okay. Ships, this is an example, will leave Portugal around March, okay, to cross the equator before June and arrive in India between August and October. They would sail south to Madeira, then let the trade winds blow them southwest around Brazil until they reach the westerlies way south that would sweep them back past the Cape and into the Indian Ocean. Yeah, you think about it, you know, all you have are thoughts and calculations, but you're in these little ships, and you're out there in the big blue with winds blowing around. Oh, it scares me even to think about it. Homeward bound vessels would leave Goa or Cochin in late December or January. The voyage from Lisbon to India usually took 6 to 8 months each way. So it's a whole year. Yeah. And then the culmination was Magellan's all around the world. He was killed here in the Philippines, but Juan Sebastián Elcano continued. And so they completed the circumvallation of the planet. Okay. I show you this because it does show the command that these people had of the seas and navigation and so forth. Okay.
Did they have piracy at this point?
I'm sorry?
Was there piracy?
Oh yeah, I'll get into that. And they knew how to deal with them too. You'll see. Okay. The problem was that there was a Portuguese going to India, and there was a Muslim coming down the east coast of Africa, also exploring, and also enslaving people and so forth. So naturally, they came to blows. Okay. Okay. This is an armada, okay, group of ships. Why do I show that? You see? In 1502, the Gama gets over there, and he's going to trade. He's going to trade with these people. He has nothing. They told him, how do you dare to come with this stuff? Okay. The textiles didn't even make mention of them. The fact was the Portuguese had nothing to trade with India. All the manufacturing materials and so on manufactured in India were so much superior, or plain did not exist in Europe. So they said, what do you do? Well, see, since Roman times, traders from various countries coexisted, and their ships were generally unarmed. They agreed, no war, just trade. Okay. The Portuguese, because of this, they had nothing to trade. But we're going to change this. And from a permanent base south of Calicut, I'll show that, they started attacking Arab merchant ships. In effect, they ran a protection racket. Why? Their artillery was superior. That is the one thing they had. Their cannon were accurate. They're very well made. They discovered, for example, the bronze made out from copper and arsenic, not tin, arsenic, which is extra strong. So nobody had anything like that. To the approach of the Americas, the Portuguese acted as strictly as monopolistic. They wanted to control the whole trade, and you could not sail there without their permission. And I'll get to this. They issued what was called a cartas. Cartas. It's a pass. So you're an Arab trader, and you got your boat over there. They come on to you and say, show me the cartas. Oh, I don't have one. Oh, man, you are in trouble, okay? So they actually also, can you imagine, also the Indian Ocean going all the way to Indonesia, you have to have these things. Or the Portuguese were always roaming around and checking. And the punishment was they probably took all your boat and whatever you had. So they had to pay attention to that. They monopolized the trade route around Africa to Europe. The presence of the Portuguese Navy forced Muslim traders to ask for help of the Mamelukes in Egypt. Well, that's logical. I mean, you attack me, I'm going to find a friend that can attack you. Well, they did. A Muslim fleet was sent from Egypt to engage the Portuguese. Big mistake. The ships that the Muslims, the Egyptians sent, were really made of long planks, held together by cords made out of coconut fibers. That precluded the use of cannon, heavy cannon, because it would shake and the cords would become loose, and the Portuguese knew this. The fleet was defeated by Don Francisco de Almeida in the Battle of New February. Look at the dates. This is February the 3rd, 1509. And that is accurate. Reports were made. This is Don Francisco de Almeida, first Viceroy of India. And this is King Manuel. They were buddies. Whatever King Manuel wanted, he would do it. That's one of Almeida's cataracts. Okay. And I go back to this armada. What?
What were the Carracks armed with?
These bronze cannons, the bronze cannons, and they had all kinds of loads. You know, if you came close, they will have case shot. So they had little balls and spread out and long, and they had cannons to fit. It's a whole science, okay? All right?
So effectively, they were the pirates.
Yeah, yeah. But they had to pass, so, okay. Exactly. And this just shows one of their expeditions in East Africa. There were raids, okay? There were exaction of tribute. You don't pay this, and we're going to destroy you. And they could do it. This is after they probably had taken care of their navy or whatever they had. Okay. So they did this. They would make allies. Okay. You play ball with us, you're going to be good. You know, we're going to bring you business. And above all, they established forts. And that was the Portuguese answer to the lack of men. You might have a lot of men, but we got artillery, and we can build forts. Okay. This is, excuse me, the 7th Armada, and that was led by Almeida. And he did all of this. Here we go again. Okay. Here is a, I think, romanticized view of what happened in the Battle of Diu. Okay. That is the battle where I said the Muslim navy was destroyed. Okay. He obviously was not thinking that what happened if he would fall in the water with all that, he would go straight down. But anyway, it took place right here, right here. There's Goa, Diu is over there. Battle took care, just offshore, Diu. Okay. And there's the battle, and it's an interesting one. You notice how Portuguese immediately sent this to block help where the main fight was happening. And it lasted a few hours. This is, I guess, the victims. And then they would do this. Okay, like they did in Diu. Immediately after, they built a fort. And they built a fort in an island. And you can only reach the island through this which they built. So they felt pretty good. They had the cannon, and also if you wanted to attack them, you would have to go through here, good luck. Or if you came with ships, you know what happened to ships with artillery. This is still exists, it's there. This is from their tourist deal. Apparently it's a tourism deal that you go and see the forts in Kerala, and you see all these Portuguese and later Dutch and English forts. They're all like the same. That's pretty imposing. And that was built in 1505. And here is the very well placed. And you see, you cannot get in there. There's no way. And they can hold on. Here's another one. It's not just one, it's a whole bunch of them. And they're very well made, they were quickly made. They were very good military men, so they knew what they could do and what they needed. Here's a fort built right there where the battle took place, and it was built in 1535. All right. Almeida was getting a little bit controversial, okay? So the king said, no, 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 I'm going to send a real administrator, somebody who really understands how to manage trade and land and so on. So he sent this guy, Alfonso de Albuquerque, okay. Was the viceroy, was made, of course, viceroy of the Indies, 1506, 15, a principal founder of Portugal's empire in the East. Okay. This guy decides, look, sure, we got the Indian, Goa and so on. We're going nowhere unless we can tap into the trade that was going on before the Portuguese were there with Southeast Asia and the Bay of Bengal and all of that. We got to get in there and actually control it. Well, to do that, first objective was Malacca. And you'll see why. Control as it does today. In fact, they're having trouble with pirates today in that area, and they can't control them. Okay? Between Malaya and Sumatra. Okay? Captured it in 1511, and they established themselves there. What does that mean? You see? It's right there. So you got to come down this way, and you're looking at this very ugly fort, and you're going to have to pay something to get by. But look now, all of this, China, that's the big money. That's the big trade is in China. They knew this. We got to get to China. Okay? First of all, they're over here. They control that. And here are the Spice Islands. Now, de facto, they have control of them. Okay? So the Moluccas. Here's a map. Those are supposed to be the Spice Islands. Okay. Everybody fought over. In 15, look at the dates. In 1516, the Portuguese had reached Canton, Guangzhou, all the way there, southern China. And after 40 years, they obtained permission from the Chinese Empire to set up a base in Macau. Okay. There was no fight. They agreed, we come in for trading. Okay. Portuguese now based at Goa and Malacca. De facto, they control all the trade in that area. They also, few people know this, began channel of trade with the Japanese, becoming the first recorded Westerners to have visited Japan. They didn't fight. They started trading. Okay. Okay. So that's where Macau was. All of this, I mean, you can get thinking about this little bitty nation, these few people and so on, and it really looks like a dream, you know, something. Well, there is this guy, Don Luis de Camões, that is the equivalent in Portuguese of a Shakespeare or a Cervantes. And he wrote a book called Os Lusíadas, meaning the Portuguese. Okay? There he is, author of Lusíadas, published in 1572. And all it is poetry, describing all of what they had done and how great it was, what they had accomplished from their point of view. Yeah. If you read Portuguese, this is beautiful. It really is beautiful. So I had to put it there. But anyway, but it's there. And it was probably written, it was written at the peak of their power, and it was just an exhortation, so to speak. Oh, we the Portuguese, we done this, we done that, we that, and so forth. Okay. But don't forget, Spain was next door. And I repeat, their grand strategy, although at first it agreed with cleaning up the Muslims from the Iberian Peninsula, then, go ahead.
Before you leave,
I'm sorry?
I read a lot of this history, and a lot of what I read was during the military dictatorship in Brazil, whenever there was censorship in the newspaper, they would print from the deities instead of the articles that they did.
It's beautiful. You read, you know, it really is beautiful. But anyway, the same year Granada fell. Yeah, go ahead.
Did Christopher Columbus train under Philip the Navigator? Excuse me, Henry the Navigator.
It's a very good question. He wasn't trained, but he read, and he was very conversant with what was being taught in the school there. Oh yeah, he knew about it. So you know, he didn't believe in a flat planet. No, none of that nonsense. Okay. The expansionary grand strategy didn't need to change too much, as they were going to encounter semi-complex and complex civilizations with centralized state structures couldn't be easily conquered by defeating the rulers. In other words, if there was a state, an organized nation, easy. That was what they wanted. The speed of conquest was directly related to the level of complexity and centralization of empires and chiefdoms. If they were true nations, well organized, they said, beautiful, oh, we can take them. Okay. So the conquest of the Aztecs at the Inca was ready made for them, really fit the pattern. But we will do that in the winter, no, not now. Okay. In contrast, when they ran into fragmented tribes, disorganized, fragmented tribes, and there was really no nation there, they will have trouble. They could not deal with guerrilla warfare. And typically when they ran into that situation, there was a fight, but then the fights lasted a long time. Some of them are still going on. In Mexico, in Yucatan, you got close to Yucatan, you got the Lacadones, and they have been forever a pain to whoever is ruling Mexico. And it goes back to this concept. Their focus was territorial, okay? Conquest. They wanted to take and hold, okay? Gold hunting for free lands, landless noblemen, okay? And evangelization. Do not underestimate evangelization. This was very serious and contrast heavily with the Portuguese. Trade was always a very marginal driver of the conquest. That would come after. You control everything, that would come after. The focus was on conquest and rule of the territory and reorganizing the native populations around silver mines or farm production centers under the guise of Christianization.
Much less religious fervor with the Portuguese than with the Spaniards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think the Portuguese, the Christianization thing, entered in the Portuguese mind except when they were cleaning up Iberia from the Muslims. Yeah. little tactics. The Spaniards, why do I say they were taken? They based their tactics in small groups of highly trained, heavily armored noblemen with small armies of 100 to 400 men during most of the initial conquest. But watch out now. These groups would ally to local tribes rival of the main regional power, and thus form highly organized armies, 10,000 and more. In other words, they would teach them how to fight. These were, in reality, adaptations of the very successful Tercio formation. Tercio formation ruled Europe for 180 years. Nobody could beat them. And this is what Diego Rivera refers to here. Here's Cortez, and he's making friends to the Tlaxcalans, which were really bad enemies of the Aztecs. This is immediately happened, and they practice that all day. Okay, Tercio. Tercio means three parts. You got the pikemen, and you got these guys, second component. These are musketeers, and then you got the third component, also musketeers here and here. And it can be this wide or it can be this wide, and it's very movable. It's not staying. They didn't believe in fortresses or anything. These guys travel light, and if you were crazy enough to come in with cavalry, these guys will take care of you. These musket fire. And it was very successful. So what they did, they adapted this basic way of doing war to the Americas. Well, this is from Diego Velázquez, the surrender of Breda in Holland. Okay. Here's the pikeman, and you see the fight still going on in there. And this is what happened in Peru. The exact same thing. Here the Indians made the mistake of attacking in formation, and these guys acted. And you see over here, that's the cavalry. Comes to envelop, create a circle, and then kill. Native laborers, serfs, were progressively replaced by African slaves. I've already said that. In the Caribbean colonies, Panama, Colombia, and Ecuador coast, the coast of all of that. This is especially so after the extension of human rights. See, there is a problem. You cannot take Indians and enslave them, because academic discussions in Valladolid and the University of Salamanca had declared them human beings and had declared them potential subjects of the crown. So once they were baptized, don't touch them, because you will have a trouble. It more or less saved the lives of a lot of Indians, okay? Also, if you read history, Philip II, the big emperor, actually he was a pacifist. He was fed up with wars. And he prohibited, forbade more conquest actions. Because all it did, he saw, yeah, the Persians, they win and so on, but they cost money, and all I see is all the silver coming in, and it gets, dissipated in these idiotic wars. So he said, no more of that. Spanish expansion stopped and became both defensive against the European powers. They had it good, they had the mines, they had everything. Why the wars? Okay? And evangelization. Okay. Here was what was meant by Christianization. That's the number of missions in Spanish Florida from 1560 to 1763. recall some of the Seminoles coming into Florida? Okay, they got respect over there. Okay? The Portuguese continued their expansion towards the interior of Brazil. They didn't pay attention to the Treaty of Tordesillas. Politically, given the size of the empire, Spain created a decentralized structure of viceroyalties and a strong public administration based on judges, lawyers, and tax collectors to rule this land empire. Portugal didn't need to do viceroyalties. Recall I said that they were all together in Brazil, the grantees. So they had it all together. So they didn't have any problem with having Peru and then Mexico over there. So the answer was this. You had the Viceroyalty of New Spain, the Viceroyalty of New Granada, then you had the Viceroyalty of Rio de la Plata, and the Portuguese just had Brazil, just one. So Spain and Portugal pursued a policy of pushing Muslims out of occupied territories during the Reconquista. They agreed there, no discussion. Okay. Second, Portugal completed the Reconquista before Spain, and thereafter engaged in sea enterprising for establishing trade posts along the African coast. Okay. Third, Prince Henry, the navigator, created the first school. This is in the world. Not quite. Ooh, I stepped. There was a matter of India and the Moguls, but we're not going to touch that. It's okay. Portuguese activities in Brazil emphasized mining and the production of sugarcane, coffee, cotton, and other similar enterprises could be controlled from the coastal enclaves. Okay? Brazilian enterprises required the importation of large numbers of African slaves. In the case of Brazil, when the Bandeirantes would capture indigenous populations, they didn't last long. They would quickly be used up. And soon they didn't have enough slaves or serfs or whatever, so they had to go and get blacks from Africa. Because in the Aristotelian way of thinking, Aristotle said that men are of two classes, those that command and those who serve the commanders. This was set in religion, okay? So the Africans to them belong to the second class. So anything you did to them, it doesn't matter. It was dependency, Brazil's dependency on slave or forced labor, okay? Continued well into the 20th century. After the independence, after Portugal was not there, they continued, okay? Just like we did. The nature of Portuguese activity in Brazil led to creation of a unified nation, in contrast to the neighboring Spanish colonies, created viceroyalties. Okay. Spain created a decentralized structure of viceroyalties and a strong public administration based on judges, lawyers, and so forth. Thank you.